This is the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast, episode 44, Living Mindfully, Connecting with Nature, Emotions, and Breath for a Stress-Free Life with Amy Stein. Amy is an herbalist, energy medicine educator, and trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, and she is going to walk us through a lot of what her passions are and how we can implement some of these things that have truly changed her life within ourselves. Some of these things are going to be a little bit more, maybe woo-woo, if you will, than you typically hear on my podcast. But I think it's so great to learn from all different kinds of people and different kinds of work that's out there. I do a lot of the same emotion work that Amy does, and so we really connected on that. And stay tuned for the end. We get into some breathwork talk, and I have a little surprise for my email subscribers at the end that Amy did for us, a little bonus clip. So be sure to stay to the end and learn about that. All right, here we go. Welcome to Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well, the podcast for women who want to lose weight but are tired of counting and calculating all the food. I'm your host, Lisa Salisbury. I'm a certified health and weight loss coach and life coach, and most importantly, a recovered chronic dieter. I'll teach you to figure out why you are eating when you aren't hungry instead of worrying so much about what you are eating. I have Amy Stein with me here today, and I'm excited for our conversation. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does, and then we'll jump right in.
Hey, Lisa, I'm happy to be here. So I live in New York, and what I do is I take the power of the plants along with energy medicine techniques and trauma-informed breathwork training to connect people back to the wisdom of their body.
All right. Tell me more. Keep going.
So basically, for me, I was brought up like the majority of people that, when you're sick, you go to the doctor, they fix you, right? So ever since I was a kid, I had symptoms. My body was giving me messages, but I didn't know what they meant. So I always had headaches and stomach aches, and I always felt like really different from everybody else because I could feel things that we couldn't see. I could understand when I didn't want to eat a certain food, or I didn't want to wear a certain piece of clothing or be around a certain person. And I would express this to the caregivers in my life, and they were like, "You're just being difficult. You're too sensitive." And so I didn't understand what this meant until my body forced me to understand. And at that point, I was a medical researcher. I was working at a big university here in New York with chronic pain patients. And they were geriatrics. And I was in my mid to late 20s, and I began to resemble them. And I thought, what's going on here? Yeah, this is not working out so well for me. And at that point, I did not understand that the body is designed to heal. I didn't understand that the body is designed to keep us safe. I didn't understand that it's difficult to go against what the body deems as safe behavior, right? So we have this idea that we're brought up with of what it's right or wrong, of a certain way to do things, a certain way to be. However, a lot of times this goes against the intelligence of the body. It goes against the wisdom of the body. Mm-hmm. And so all of this I had to discover in the process of unlearning, which I'm still on. It's been about 13 years of unlearning. Mm-hmm. And that's where I join you from today.
Great. Okay, fascinating. So we're talking a little bit today about habits and making healthy decisions, and going to relate this into some of this, what our bodies are telling us. And we're just going to start out talking about why it's such a struggle to make healthy decisions. And I think I just see this so often with my clients because lack of information, I don't really find to be the problem. They want to tell me that. They want to say, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know, I don't know what to eat. But when I really push them, when I really question them, the truth is they do know what foods feel best in their bodies. Most of my clients have been on several, if not dozens of diets. They know that they feel best on, say, higher carbs or higher protein or, whatever. I feel best to eat this many times a day. They know what they feel best on because they've tried all the things. Mm-hmm. And saying, I don't know, is a way to keep us from change. It's a way, I think it's one of the ways that our body keeps us safe because mm-hmm. any kind of change and difference is deemed dangerous. And mm-hmm. so once we get past the, I don't know, and here's the thing too, if you've never been on a diet in your life, Google's not hard to use, right? So I'm always like, lack of information is not the reason people don't make a healthy decision. It's
Mm-hmm.
something else. And I work a lot with the thoughts and the feelings. Tell us why you think it's such a struggle for people to make the decisions that they know make their bodies feel best. And that's kind of, maybe you can also tell us, I'm asking you a ton of questions here, but maybe you can also tell us, like, well, for me, when I talk about make a healthy decision, I'm talking about, I know what works best in my body, and sometimes I don't do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us do know. I know that if I overeat this thing, I'm going to feel gross. I'm going to feel bad in my body. My pants are going to be too tight. I'm going to be bloated if I eat that dairy. Like, I know, and I do it anyway. This is like what my clients tell me, right?
Yeah, I can so relate to that. So there's a lot of knowledge, right? So they call it Dr. Google, but it's not
Right.
always the right knowledge for you. So it goes back to the idea of understanding how the body was designed. Yes, it's designed to keep us safe, but it's also designed to heal. The issue in our society is that there's only one right way to do it, right? So like
Yeah.
everyone does this protocol, and if you didn't lose weight, that's on you. There's something, you didn't do something right, right? So there's this stigma, this idea that you didn't follow the directions properly. You didn't follow the rules. You're different. We don't know how to help you. And people don't want to be different because, again, it goes back to back in the day when if you were different, it was bad because you could be left behind by the tribe.
Yeah. You get kicked out for if you
Yeah.
disagree. Yeah. It is dangerous not to fit in to our brains.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, so in our society, we live solely in the brains. We don't live in the body. And so I invite people to remind them that the brain, the mind is just part of the body. And actually, the real intelligence is in the heart, which is where your intuition lies. So if you can come back and listen to that small whisper that you've not been listening to your whole life, right? Because it's not real. You can't see it, so it doesn't exist. But it does exist, and it is real, and it is valid. If you can reconnect back to that intuition, it will guide you on the best way for you. So the mantra I always have for everybody is you get to choose what's best for you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, do X, Y, and Z. Never going to do that because we're all different. We all have past live experiences. We've all had past pain and trauma and experiences that have made us the people that we are today, right? So this idea of understanding that these belief systems, these programmings were inherited before age 7. So Bruce Lipton speaks about this in his book. And so understanding that these beliefs of what is right and wrong, of how you're supposed to look, of how you're supposed to be, are not yours. They were passed down to you by your society, by your culture, by your caregivers, right? So that's the first step, is understanding that this was not something that you chose, right? You did not choose this. You didn't choose for you to think of things in this way. It's a dynamic that was just is introduced to you by your society. So that's the first step of the unlearning process, right? Is questioning, do these beliefs, do these systems of living still serve me? So it's also a process of awareness, of being aware of how I am behaving, how I'm interacting, and does this still serve me? Because what also happens in childhood is, again, we were all raised by humans who are not perfect, right? We were not raised by robots. So we had needs that were not always met, right? So we expressed a need. It wasn't always met in the way that the body needed it to be met. And so a wound forms. And when that wound is formed, a protector forms within the body to keep you safe, right? Again, the body's designed for survival, for safety. So that lizard brain, that reptilian brain that they speak about, that's what that is. It's just for survival. It doesn't have logical thought processes. It's just like, oh my God, are we going to die? Don't do that, right? So we all have these protectors, and they're varied. There's about 25 of them. I'm going to just list a few so the listener can relate. So that's somebody who's going to be the victim. That's somebody who's going to be the control freak. We have the codependent. We have the person who is going to shame other people. We have the person who's going to numb out. We have the addict. Like, these are all personality aspects of us that we all have. There are ones that may be more predominant in others, right? So I identify as the person who's that control freak, right? Like, if I can control every aspect around me, then I can prevent things from happening, right? But that's not realistic. I'm also that person, the comic relief. So if I can put people's attention on what I'm saying rather than the shit show around me, then it's better, right? Because, oh, I look like I have my stuff together and I'm making everybody laugh. But it's an idea, again, of keeping us safe, of part of the tribe. But it actually keeps us safe as childhood, but it does not keep us safe as adults. It actually keeps us stuck. So it keeps us stuck
Stuck.
from,
Yeah.
right, creating new habits, from creating more positive behaviors, because the body does not understand the difference in time. So when these protectors formed, age 3, age 4, age 5, age 6, age 7, it just thinks like, oh my God, this happened at age 7. It doesn't understand I'm age 40 now. And that it might not have the same direct effect. It just thinks, oh my God, we're at age 5 again. And it puts me right
Mm.
back there again. And this is why we react when we're triggered. We can't respond, right? Because we just go back into that reptilian brain of it's got to be survival. We have to survive. We have to get through this event. And even if it's something that logically we may know after the fact, like, how come I freaked out about that? The body doesn't understand that. It's that trauma response, right? So trauma is a response to a stressor. So you and I could have the exact same stressor happen, right? So I form a trauma pattern in my body. You don't, because you allow your body to process the event. The problem is most people in our society do not do that. They don't allow the
Mm.
body, they don't trust the body to process through the event. We don't take the time to feel our feelings. We don't take the time to stop and feel our sensations. So we create all this stuck energy in the body, which leads to disease and illness and pain and feeling down on ourselves, right? Like we're not enough. We're not good enough. Oh, it must be something wrong with me because this protocol didn't work. This diet didn't work, but it worked for 30 other people I know. What's wrong with me? So we
Mhm.
become like this self-deprecating attitude. And we think that there's something wrong with us, but there isn't. It's just the way that your body is designed. And we work against our body and our society rather than working with it because we don't understand how it works.
Mm. Okay, so how do you get to that point of understanding? So you're saying understanding how it works as far as like the uniqueness of how your body, say, loses weight or how, tell me more about not understanding how your body works.
Right. So it's really in a lot of different ways. We don't understand the way that the body works, right? So again, like I said, we don't feel our feelings and we don't feel our sensations in our society. So maybe we choose to eat them, right? So rather
Right.
than sitting with it and being curious about it, we just immediately want to numb out. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to feel it because we've been taught by these programs, these belief systems, that either it's not real, it doesn't exist, or we're too sensitive, or we should not be bothered by that, or we should get over it already, right? Like these are all common themes. It's, oh, you don't
Mhm.
have to deal with that. That's not real. That emotion isn't real. But it is because everything is energy. And emotions are just energy in motion. And so if we had been taught from a young age to feel our feelings rather than saying, I'll give you something to cry about or don't cry over this, things like that we've been told all our lives rather than
Mhm.
saying like what is coming up around this, right? Where do I feel it in my body? Where is the sensation correlating to the emotion?
One of the other things too, when you're talking about, as children, I know what you mean. Your parents say, well, I'll give you something to cry about. But the other thing I think that was really common was, well, here's a treat. Here's a lollipop, basically.
Yeah.
Here's a cookie to soothe what's happening
Yes.
in whether
Right.
that hurt was emotional. I'm so sorry that that little boy hurt your feelings. Like, let's go get
Mm-hmm.
some ice cream. Not only were we taught, or rather not taught about our emotions, but we learned that when we have a bad emotion, food is the solution.
Yep.
And so I just think it is just only natural that we do that as adults.
Mm-hmm.
We've been soothing with food literally since we were babies. And of course,
Right.
because when we were babies, our only communication available was to cry, and then we were
Yep.
soothed. And so that was the communication. But then that is just carried on. I mean, I did it too. Like, no
Yeah.
shade. We all do it. We all
Right.
do it as parents. I have 4 kids. They all got food to keep them quiet at church. They all
Yep.
got food to keep them happy in the airplane. They all got food to keep, right? Like, we used food to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And
Right. And that's
it's,
the thing. It's that conscious unawareness,
yeah.
right?
So it's only natural that not only do we not know how to feel our feelings, but that the first to soothe the
Mm-hmm.
feeling is food. And I just think, it's in Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, where she says, here's the rub, food works. It does work.
Right.
It does.
Right.
It works to soothe your feelings. So we have to unlearn that part too, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And it goes back to this idea of dissociation, right? Like we're dissociating from the body. So we're going to try to numb out and get the symptom to go away, right? So whether it's a pill, whether it's food, whether it's social media, you're choosing a way to dissociate. And now there's nothing wrong with that if you're recognizing it's happening, right? Like we all need to do that.
Yes.
So we live in a chaotic world.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
Like I'm never going to sit here and say I don't ever binge watch Netflix. That would lie. That would be me lying.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say that, right? I'm not going to say I don't have that chocolate bar occasionally when I'm craving it. I do. But I willingly understand, like, I'm eating this because I'm craving this and it's not the best choice for me. But I understand consciously that I'm doing it.
I totally know what you're saying, where I'm like, I'm going to eat this because I'm feeling bad. And I just say it straight up in my brain. I know very well this isn't going to solve the problem. But right now, this is what I need. And when I'm like overly aware of my being an emotional eater in that moment, I never eat as much as I would if I was not fully conscious of it. And then I let that food soothe me a little bit and I'm able to then move on. And sometimes that does help me deal with it a little bit.
Yeah, it's like a little Band-Aid, right? Like and I always talk about this, that we need to take small steps to not overwhelm the system and not overwhelm the body, in that the chaotic world that we live in, it affects all systems in the body. It's just not the nervous system. It literally affects all systems. So it affects your GI system. It affects your, cardiology system. It affects the lungs and the respiratory system. It affects everything. So when we can understand that, it's just not, oh, I'm going to do something to support my nervous system. It's the idea of I'm going to support my system as a whole, because the body is a whole and it works as a whole. So we cannot keep cutting it up into pieces and farming it out to different doctors. It doesn't work like that. You need to look at it as a whole, right? So it's the understanding of these behaviors are unconscious reactions. Again, going back to that idea that 95% of our thoughts are unconscious. They are not conscious, logical associations. They are very much a reaction of this happened then, this is going to happen now, so this is what I need to do, right? It's a very A, B, and C. And it doesn't change up. It doesn't really deviate because the body doesn't understand that. So when we're trying to change it up, like, no, A plus B can equal D, the body's like, no, it does not. It does not. And it will look like it's sabotaging you, right? Like you'll hold on to weight. You may not, the protocol you think will work won't work. The food you thought you could eat is now giving you a reaction, or you're putting on more weight, or you're not able to tolerate it. Like it can manifest in so many different ways. But when we can stop looking at it as my body is broken, there's something wrong with me, and rather being curious and having that awareness of what is my body trying to tell me, right? And you spoke about this in the beginning, that a lot of my clients understand what foods agree with them and what don't. But it's breaking that program of this is a healthy food, or this is an unhealthy food, or this is a food I should be eating, right? It's breaking up with that idea. We are all unique. We all have unique experiences. There is no one fit diet or journey for anybody, and it will change because healing is not linear. So things that may have worked for you 5 years ago are not going to work now. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be, right? Because you grow, you evolve, and you learn.
And I think a really good word for that, and a lot of people use it, is bioindividuality. We just have so many individual things that we don't even realize and we think are not important, and they totally are. And it goes beyond just my allergies or food sensitivities or preferences. I want to remind people that your food journal is the most important nutritional study you'll ever read. You can read all the nutrition studies, all of the different studies on this diet or this ingredient or that food or superfood, but you have to put it in your body and then see what happens. And so keeping track of what you eat without regards, for my clients, without regards to calories or macro content, you don't need to keep track of all that. You just need to write down, I ate a banana. How did I feel? Right? That's how I discovered I couldn't eat bananas because of my own food journal. Like, oh, it's not the green smoothies that don't agree with me. It's the banana.
No, and
So,
that's true. And it's so important to understand that. And again, without judgment or expectation, right? Because we get caught in that cycle of this is a healthy food or this is a food that is supposed to be good for me. And I see myself falling into this at times too, because I say I eat real food, right? And people are like, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I eat food that has an alive energy component to it.
mm,
It's a vegetable, a fruit. It's an animal that was raised properly and slaughtered humanely. I have farms around me where I buy my pasture-raised meat and poultry from, knowing that these animals are cared for and that they are not suffering, because anything I consume, you're consuming the energy of. So when I explain that to people, it's a novel concept, but this is how we lived for thousands of years, right?
mhm.
Like you didn't have supermarkets, you didn't have a drive-through. You had what you could get. And it's a big part of my own healing, my own work, in that respecting the intelligence of the body and working with it rather than against it.
Okay, I think that is kind of my next question was like, okay, we've kind of established why we struggle, but then how do we break these habits? And I
Mhm.
think that's kind of where you're leading into with that. So tell us a little bit about how to make that change.
Again, it can look different for everybody, right? So energy medicine is very, very vast in the offerings it has, right? It can be EFT and tapping. It can be breath work. It can be yoga. It can be Tai Chi, Qigong. It can look so different to so many different people. It can just be walking, mindfully walking, right? A meditative walk. It doesn't need to look the same for every single person. For me, it's communing with Mother Nature. There's something bigger than me that exists that I don't have control over, right? This idea that we don't respect Mother Nature for her intelligence, we don't revere her, there is no ritual anymore in our society.
Mhm,
So again, it's another level of disconnection. We're disconnected from ourselves, we're numb from the neck down, but we're also disconnected from Mother Nature and all that she has to offer us. And so that was what I started with first, because I could see it.
mm,
It wasn't
mhm,
invisible. I could see the birds, I could see the trees, I could see the plants. I could understand that these quote unquote weeds that were growing were actually more nutrient dense than anything I could grow myself. And it was fascinating to me that everything that was growing had medicinal properties, right? And it was working with my body. My body recognized it. Did not recognize the pharmaceuticals. It did not recognize the over the counter prescriptions, but it recognized the intelligence that was existing in Mother Nature. And then that led me into energy medicine, because you can't always see it, but everything is energy. You and I and everything around us that is in existence is energy. And this is something that has been talked about for thousands of years, but it's not talked about in our society a lot. But it's been around for 5,000 years, just like plant medicine, indigenous medicine, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine. The idea of the meridians came about 5,000 years ago. So this idea is foreign to people, but it is the real traditional medicine. Our system now in Western medicine is only 250 years old, and it does not look at the body as a whole.
yeah, that does bug me.
It looks at the body in pieces.
Yeah, I can see the value of like having a specialist who's like, no, I'm really, really good at repairing the ligaments of the knee. Like, I'm really good at that. I can see the wisdom of specializing when it comes to those kinds of things. But when we're talking about,
Like
yeah,
emergency medicine.
emergencies or
Right.
like just my husband works with a lot of sports medicine doctors and just all
Mhm.
of those, like the way the shoulder works as opposed to the knee, as opposed to the ankle, like he does all those. And I see the wisdom in that, but it's the internal systems, because those guys are still like doing those repairs of the bones with regards to the joints that are next to it, right? You don't line up the hip and disregard the way the knee is lined up. Of course they're doing that. But what I think we don't connect as much is the internal medicine, as all of the internal organs and those systems. We have like a doctor for the endocrine system. Like, why is she separate? Why does she not talk with the doctor for, just so many different internal specialties, which it is very
Mhm.
confusing to me. You have a dermatologist and it's like, well, like all of your gut issues are manifesting on your skin, right? Like, why is your dermatologist not a gut specialist? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I know. And that's what was so frustrating for me is, growing up in this paradigm, working in the paradigm of it, seen it fail people and then it personally failing me, I was beyond frustrated when I started doing what people label alternative. And I thought, what is so alternative about it? It's been around for 5,000 years. What we consider what medicine now has only been around for 250 years, and it's based upon you being sick. It's a sick care system. And so I thought, well, why wouldn't I use these ancient healing systems that look at my body as a whole and understand the complexities that every system has an effect on each other? They're not unique. They're all connected. And so when I began to understand that and began to understand that I could do things that would bring more healing energy into my body, into my environment, right? So the first thing that I changed up, and this is huge for weight loss, is examining what I use every day on my body and to clean my home.
Yeah, the chemicals.
Because if you are right, if you're exposed to mass amount of chemicals and toxins, the water you drink, the air you breathe, I mean, a lot of it you can't control, but a lot of it you can. That will cause the body to be stressed and it will hold on to weight because it's inflammation and it knows it's toxic and it wants to try to wall it off in the cells. And so that will be a huge issue for weight loss as well if you're not looking into that.
Those endocrine disruptors that are in a lot of our personal care products, like my daughters used to love to go with their friends to Bath and Body, and no shade to any particular company, but you know, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, and I just told them straight up, like, just so you know, like if you have menstrual issues, like that's going to be the first thing to go. So just so you know, like you can use it now, but now that they're teenagers and fully into that, I'm like, yeah, well, you should probably stop using that. And they think I'm crazy. And one of them really has stepped away from it, but the other not so much.
And that's the thing. Again, you can't force people, right? So it's pervasive. I mean, if you're drinking out of plastic, if you're eating out of plastic, if you're using a microwave, I mean, there's so many levels to it. So I did it really down and dirty all at once because I was dying and I had no choice. But when I work with clients, it's a very small steps and like, hey, what are you running out of? Let's go into the environmental working group site and find a better option.
Right. One at a time.
Yeah. And there's a lot of greenwashing because all the big companies who we will rename nameless went out and bought all these small companies and changed the ingredients because it was too much money to use the ingredients that were good for you. And so what I did is I made all my own products and then I began making my own infused oil bombs and my own tinctures and things like that. I can control what I was putting in and on my body. And that made a huge difference. That's always the first step I suggest to anybody is to looking at your toxic load. Like what are you putting in and on your body? What are you, that Yankee Candle is not good for you. You may think it smells good, but it's causing a lot of issues, right? Like the plugins and the air fresheners and all that stuff. Like you're just polluting your body. So if your body is stressed out, it's not going to work with you because it's just trying to put out all the fires that you're giving it, right? So again, understanding how the body works. The body does not do well with things like that. So if we can decrease the levels of the toxins we're exposed to, again, we live in the world. So being aware that you cannot control everything, but there are a lot of things that you can control.
Well, think about too, like where you spend the most of your time. Even if you work, I mean, I work from home, but even if you work outside the home, you're still spending all of that time sleeping in your bed. One of the things I started with was laundry. Like I use a completely free and clear type. That's like a brand, but just, free of all of the fragrances and that sort of thing. And then I use wool dryer balls in the dryer. So those sheets and towels that I'm using and sleeping on, those aren't exposing me to more chemicals and more fragrance. And fragrance just gives me a headache anyway. My girls are always like, you never wear perfume. I'm like, yeah, well, it gives me a headache. I've tried to just use like some essential oils, but no, like I just don't deal well with fragrance. And so everything I use is fragrance free.
Yeah. And it's pervasive. We don't even realize like the mattress you sleep on, the pillows you sleep on, they're all sprayed with flame retardants, right? So you're spending 8 hours a night, hopefully in bed because sleep is so important. So again, that's another touchstone. If you're not sleeping 8 hours, you need to be sleeping between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. to get that restorative healing sleep where your body is cleaning up all the crap that you were exposed to throughout the day. So, your pajamas are sprayed with flame retardant. the towels, the sheets, all of that. So if you can, invest in some organic sheets and a laundry detergent that does not have chemicals in it, you can easily make something like that, right? So for me, I was on a budget because I was not working. So I made a lot of stuff because it was cheaper and I could control what was in it. I knew exactly what was going into it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was using high quality essential oils, or I just, like you said, I don't use it, right? Like it's also an awareness of what do you really need?
Mm-hmm.
So we're so consumed with having all this stuff, but do you really need it, right? So Wi-Fi is another big toxin exposure. So if you have a router that's on 24/7, that is radiating in your home constantly, 24/7. So you can put it on a Christmas timer and have it at least be off while you're sleeping because no one needs to use the Wi-Fi, right? Having a smart meter, again, that's something that 24/7 is radiating exposure into your home. All of these outside toxic exposures that you can't quote unquote see are causing destruction and imbalance to your body. And it's causing stress to your body. Even if you are not aware and feel it, it's still having that effect, right?
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
With all of these, new basically toxins that are happening, because a lot of these chemicals in our cosmetics and body care products and cleaning products, a lot of them are new relatively to the human race. They're within the last 50 years or so, as well as, the Wi-Fi and these sorts of things, a lot of the farming practices. So we see this, and yet we have good lifespans. Like people are living. And I know there's some people that are like, our lifespan is going down, but that has somewhat to do with, statistics of COVID and those sorts of things. But generally speaking, the human lifespan is increasing. So like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate. How are we living longer and yet we are being exposed to these things?
But are we living well?
There you
So
go.
most people after age 55, how many medications are they on? How much pain do they have? How many diseases have they been diagnosed with, right? Are you living well? That's my question to you. Do you feel good every single day?
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee not. I guarantee that you have something to complain about, right? That's just part of being human. But it's this idea of, again, practicing awareness, but with curiosity, not shaming yourself. I'm not shaming anybody on here, right? Everyone gets to choose what's best for them. I'm very rigid because I can feel it. I'm highly sensitive. So I can feel the electromagnetic frequencies. I can feel the Wi-Fi. I can feel the smart meter. So I'm not going to put myself in situations where I'm going to feel worse, right? Who wants to do that? But unwillingly, we do that all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We unwillingly eat food that is not good for us. We unwillingly do habits that are not good for us, right? Unwillingly, we dissociate and disconnect from ourselves and not trust the messages from the body because we've been taught that it's broken and we need to beat it into submission rather than learning how to work with it, respecting the messages from it. So one of the free gifts that I've included is if you feel disconnected from the neck down, try these 5 daily tips, right? To reconnect back to your body. The other one I was speaking of before is when you were asking me, how do you understand what the body's trying to tell you? How do you connect back to the body? Is I've included a healing journal with a feeling wheel. Because a lot of times if you ask somebody, what do you feel like today? They'll say overwhelmed, anxious, stressed. But there could be 15 different emotions that could fall under those categories, right?
Increasing your emotional language is so valuable to knowing what is happening, because anxious and nervous are actually kind of different. And overwhelmed and busy, different.
Right. And
you have to identify exactly what's happening in order to, really feel that vibration.
And it goes further. So when you identify the emotion, right, we also identify where is it coming up in the body. Maybe you feel it in your belly. Maybe you feel it in your chest, right? It's chest tightening. Maybe you feel it in your head. You get like a ringing in your ears, right? It's important to understand how your body expresses that to you because it's different for everybody, right? So when I feel stressed, I get a stomachache and a migraine. It's instantaneous. And but before that, if I really pay attention, I feel a tightness in my shoulders. I might feel something along the lines in another part of my body. So again, it's this practice of understanding how your body is designed and understanding how you can support it rather than stress it out more.
Yeah, so helpful. Just really anything you can do, I feel like, to be in touch with how you are feeling, where it is. I do a similar exercise about finding that emotion in the body, really taking a look at it. What does it feel like? I feel like it is somewhat of a buzzword, kind of a saying, feel your feelings. But a lot of my clients are like, what are you even talking about? What does that really mean? And so taking you through this step-by-step exercise of identifying where it is in the body. If you could look inside, what color is it? Is it moving around fast or slow? Is it jumpy? Like as many words as you can to describe it. Sometimes you can compare it to an animal. And I always start with, when you say you have butterflies in your stomach, you know exactly what that means. And if you looked in there, like you could see them, they're all flitting around, and that's what it feels like. Do you have a monkey in your brain? Do you have an elephant on your chest? Really being able, it sounds childlike to relate our feelings to animals, and yet it gives you a very clear picture of what that emotion is really doing in the body. It might also just be rocks on your chest. Maybe it's an inanimate object that you can compare it to, but as many ways you can describe this feeling and voice what it is, even if you're just voicing it in your own head and your own thoughts. It's great if you can write it down. It's so valuable to let that feeling exist and bring it up. Feelings dissipate in 60 to 90 seconds when you are doing this practice. When you say, I shouldn't feel this way, and you push it down, that feeling is not going to dissipate. It's just going to come right back up when the weight that you've put on it is released, whether that weight is just mental, stop feeling this, or physical, where you've put some food on it and you're just shoving that feeling down. When you feel it in such a way that you are describing it and allowing it to be present in your body, that's when it dissipates. And that is how we can release some of these feelings out of the body and not keep building on them. And I am not what I would consider a trauma specialist or trauma informed in my coaching, as far as like, I don't work with a lot of trauma, but I will say that I know enough to say that if we consistently push down feelings and push them down and push them down, that does cause micro traumas. And it's very difficult to get past that when we have just consistently pushed away our feelings.
Absolutely. Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. No, and it's so important to understand. So for me, what I use and what I use with clients is breath work, because it's something you've been doing since birth, right? You're breathing. But in our society, we don't breathe with intention. We breathe shallowly because we don't want to feel the feelings. We don't want to feel our sensations. But when you can feel safe in that space where you feel supported, because safety is paramount in trauma informed. That's the first step. And the most important part of it is that the client feels safe, right? So this idea of feeling safe to be back in your body, because if we're not in our body, the body cannot process out the trauma, cannot process out what needs to be removed and healed. And everyone has experienced trauma, whether it's big T trauma, right? Or little T trauma.
Yeah, I love that distinction.
Little T trauma can be traffic. I mean, it could be sitting in traffic. It could be someone flipping you the bird. It can be your dog ate a bunny rabbit in front of you.
Okay, listeners, that just happened to Amy, by the way.
We
talked about it before.
Yeah. Thank you for our interview. That just happened.
Okay.
Yes. But so I actually I forced myself, knowing I had to do this interview. I'm like, you need to just process this out so that it does not affect your interview. Just process it out. Right. And so I sat with it. I held a safe space for myself. So these are things we can do. We're just not taught them, right? It's tools that we have. Once we learn them, they're part of our toolbox. And then we can use them and respond rather than react. We can become less triggered. We can become less likely to dissociate, or we can be aware when we're dissociating and still choose that behavior, but with awareness, right? It goes back to this idea of awareness. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that there's so many different ways for you to do that. So if breath doesn't feel good, you could dance, you could take a yoga class, you could sing, right? The thing I like about breath is there's no rules. So you don't have to sit on the floor in silence with no thoughts. Breath, you can vocalize, you can move, you can dance, you can use the freedom however your body wants to express the energy. It all gets to be here. It's all allowed. There are no rules. That's why I like it, because it makes it open for everybody. It doesn't have to look a certain way.
And so is that like sort of like guided breathing, like in pattern breathing.
Yeah.
I have done several different kinds of patterned breathing. And a lot of times I end up feeling like I have to hyperventilate. Like I'm feeling like I'm out of breath. So I haven't really found my favorite, to be honest. So whether or not it works for me, what is your favorite pattern of breathing to teach?
I can totally relate to that. So to be honest, it's what you're feeling is the activation. It's too much for your body, right? And if you don't have them freedom to express the way that you need, it feels like you're going to have a panic attack. And so for
Yeah,
me,
because sorry, I keep interrupting
it's
you,
okay.
but
No.
I was practicing this one that we learned in my health coaching certification, and it's supposed to be like super relaxing. The instructor was like, I'm going to fall asleep up here on stage. And I'm like, I feel like I just was running.
Right.
I can't seem to relax when I do these patterns. And so I've tried several. Help me.
Right. And that's the thing. And that was me too. So again, this is completely normal. And this is why I want to release the stigma around it, because I was that person as well. So I practiced Kundalini yoga for years, and that's a very rigorous type of yoga with a lot of forceful breath, activating breath. And I use it as a way to escape from my body because all the things were coming up and I was like, nope, not going to feel that. So I would use it to escape from my body. And then when I decided to do this training, I didn't actually decide it. The universe just kept sending it to me and it was like, oh, you need to do this other trauma training. And I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. I've done 5 years. I can't do another training. And the reason was because it allowed me the freedom to honor and be in my body and listen to what my body needed. The breath that I typically do myself in my own practice and then I actually hold space for other people is just in through the nose, out through the mouth.
Okay.
There's nothing special about it.
Okay.
And if I do something, right, if I do something like if I can intuitively feel like someone needs to move something, I'll tell them to make noise, vocalize it, move your body. So I sway a lot. You can rock, you can hit the pillow if you're laying down, right? You could stamp your feet. Again, you're on mute. I can't hear you. You can put yourself on mute. I do need to see you because that's part of being trauma informed for safety purposes. But you can do so many different things with breath, just moving it out with an in through the nose and out through the mouth. You could speed it up. You can make it deeper. There's a lot of ways that you can actually alter it that feels good to your body. But for me, 9 times out of 10, I do in through the nose and out through the mouth. Literally, 9 times out of 10.
I feel so validated right now because literally just like a few days ago, my mom, and not to throw her under the bus, but nobody probably that listens knows my mom. She sometimes she gets very nervous and she gets right on the verge of panic attacks. But when she gets on the verge and I could see what was happening, I was like, okay, mom, right in my eyes. And I like grab her hands and I was doing in through the nose, out through the mouth, pattern, match my breathing. And I'm just like, what you're feeling is anxiety. And I just call out the emotion. And I just help her process that feeling. But I was, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I was thinking, I don't know a better breathing pattern, but apparently
it works.
It's the right one.
I mean, listen, you could alter it in so many ways. You could do a top hold, right? Where you take an inhale, you hold the breath at the top. That can feel exhilarating, but it can also feel really anxiety provoking. But so again, it's different every time. So one time that breath may feel good, the next day that hold may not. So it's again working with the body because you can also hold the breath out and it can be grounding on a bottom hold. But it can also feel like, oh my God, I don't have any air in my lungs and the body starts to panic. So it's understanding the mechanisms of the way the body works and being open to what can come through. And being okay with it doesn't have to look a certain way. It gets to look different for everybody. And that's the beauty of it in that you get to decide what's best for you in all things.
Yeah, such a good message. I noticed the time. So I am going to wrap this up with Amy. Why don't you tell us how people can connect with you or learn more about what you do? You mentioned a couple of free gifts we're going to offer. I think we'll put those links in the show notes. Where else can people find you?
They can go to mindbodyspiritbreath.com.
Great. That's it.
Yeah. Well, there's other links on there, so I'm not going to bombard people with links.
I love it. Okay, perfect. It's been a pleasure having you. I learned so much from Amy today that I asked her to stay on and record a quick breathwork session, especially for my email subscribers. So if you would like to hear that, it is a 5-minute session with her, so you can hear her give you this guided work to breathe and connect with your body. It was really nice. I did it with her. And when I come on back at the end, I sound like a little bit out of it because I literally am so relaxed. So the link to get that mini session with her is in the show notes. Hey, thanks for listening today. If you're ready to get some personalized coaching from me, I'd encourage you to schedule a free strategy session. Visit www.wellwithlisa.as.me, or it's easier just to find that link in the show notes. We'll talk about where you currently are with your weight loss goals, and I'll give you some actionable tools you can start implementing right away. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released. And if you're learning something new and enjoying the podcast, I'd love for you to leave me a 5-star rating and a review. Thanks again for joining me, Lisa Salisbury, in this episode of Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well.